closing in on 7 weeks out of Nationals. We did our last video update for you guys last Tuesday, and it is now Thursday morning. So it's been 9 days since our last update. A lot's happened since then. I had a little bit of a delay on my end, so that's why we didn't get a 7-day update period of time. So we are here on Thursday morning, and I want to really recap the last 9 days. Actually, okay, so last 7 days. So last Thursday, I was able to see Nadia in person in the morning, and it really helped give me perspective as to where she's at, and then also with seeing her body and how fresh it still looked, not overly depleted, not beaten down, I decided to start pushing markers up in terms of fat loss. And ultimately the reason why I wanted to do this is because between now and October 24th, there's going to be some times where Nadia and I are together, we're able to work together, there's going to be times where we're apart. And then when I get down full-time to Florida, I basically wanted her body to be in a position where we can kind of coast into Nationals from there. And really, ultimately, that's always the goal. That doesn't always happen, but the reason why I want to try to get that to happen as best as we can, especially for females, as we talked about last week, is the inflammation markers that they have within their body. So if we can kind of ease off of things that cause inflammation that final week, and we're not trying to really kill the fat loss aspect of the prep, it's just going to allow her to be able to present a fresher look to the stage. And then the other important thing, especially for you girls, outside of inflammation, is just your confidence going into a show. So if we can really use this month to capitalize and really push hard during October, and then in November just kind of fine-tune things, fine-tune variables, and then really set her up to just be at her best without being overly depleted or having to overly kind of push fat loss too hard towards the end because we possibly made some mistakes and we were behind. That's why I started to bring things up in terms of her, the variables that we did for her changes for this week.
Yeah, I like that plan, and I think it's an awesome idea to push now rather than later, because not only the stress on the body in the deep end of the prep, but the stress mentally of feeling like you still have so far to go and you still have so much fat to lose and there's so much work to be done. I feel like having that time now that we can afford to push a little bit harder, that is going to allow us in the end few weeks to kind of not necessarily let off the gas, but not have to push as hard because we'll already be in a better spot. I think that's just going to guarantee not only physically looking up to the standard, but mentally being just relieved and less stressed and just feeling better overall going into all of it.
Yeah, and something that I want you guys to get from this series that we're doing is it's so much more than just X's and O's of just me sending her a diet. So when I'm making changes and when we're going through our process together, it's about seeing where she's at mentally, building confidence within the current situation that she's in, explaining the process not only for herself but then for application that she can apply to others, which I think is extremely important. So what I want you to do is I want you to lay out what I changed this week, and then I want to go over the discussion that you and I had about, you came to me and said, hey, why are you making these changes, or how do you know that X, Y, and Z is going to work? And then I'll kind of give you my thought process to everybody else of what we talked about.
Okay, awesome. So on the 24th of September was that Thursday that you saw me, and we made those changes that day. We had added, instead of doing the post-workout on the bike that was steady state, we changed that to intervals on the stairs. And after discussing about inflammation and the difference between the stairs and the lower impact cardio, it had me kind of curious. So I wanted to ask you about that, but some other things we changed. Let's see. I think steps we kept the same. My fasted cardio in the morning was the same.
Same mode, yeah. Same mode for the fasted cardio in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All of my food remained the same. I know you said you talked about wanting to possibly switch the high day, and on Friday rather, we only did the one high day, and then we went back to the base diet on Saturday. And we only gave my body one high day, which I still responded really well from. I had a pretty significant drop that last week in the last 7 days. And then the question that I had asked you pertaining to the cardio and the intervals regarding the inflammation, let me see if I can scroll on I think I asked you in WhatsApp probably.
Yeah, I'm actually, guys, I want you to know this is in real time, so I also want to check something here because I thought you refed on Saturday too.
I thought I just did one day. Maybe I'm losing it already.
Okay, no, you're correct. Okay, so that was one of the other changes that I made too. That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And I'll explain that. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves any further, I want to go into, so I saw Nadia in person, and from a fat level standpoint, the main thing that I saw was that we need to get fat off of her lower midsection. And then I honestly think her glutes are like, when you're looking at assessing fat levels on a person, you need to assess where they hold the most. And Nadia doesn't really hold in her glutes. Like, I think her glute shape for 7 weeks out of the Nationals is excellent. That doesn't mean that her fat levels there aren't going to come down more, but it's just going to kind of naturally happen within us needing to target the areas that we need to target to make sure they come in. So for her, what I really noticed is I wanted more fat off of her hamstrings, adductors, and then lower stomach. Now, going into cardio, and the question that Nadia asked me was like, how do you know that the changes that you made are going to work? And my answer to her, and this is an answer that as a coach you need to be comfortable saying, is I honestly don't know, because this is our first prep together. But what I did was I made changes that are going to typically tend to lead in the direction of progress in terms of fat loss. And then I just need to make sure that and monitor that the things are happening in the order that they should. So taking her from a fed state of post-workout cardio at an easy interval on the bike to then increasing intervals. And basically my thought process on intervals goes back to like Lyle McDonald's research on stubborn fat protocols. So that's what I implemented with her, was a really hard, impactful interval period post-workout, just to really stimulate fat loss during that time. And then we're just going to see how she responds. And what I told her is basically everything that we've done up to this point has worked, okay? So within the few variables that I changed, if something starts to go wrong, then we're just going to go right back to what worked. And also the other thing that I wanted to kind of teach you guys through what we did is, up to this point, we started out with one refeed. That worked really well. Then I wanted to kind of keep her metabolism going and go to 2 refeeds, and we've done that for a while now. And now I wanted to go to a process of maybe slowing down the rate at which we refeed. But within that, I have to be very cautious to make sure that she's also not slowing down her metabolism. So just this week, we tried it out just to refeed 1 day rather than 2, and she's honestly, her fat loss has been excellent. So my thought process within refeeding over 2 days, and the reason why I reduced it down to 1, is even though she wasn't really getting a spike in those refeeds in terms of her weight, I thought it might be prolonging, extending fat loss rather than getting right back to fat loss. So we're basically getting a spike to kind of increase markers of metabolism, and then we're going to go right back to a fat loss phase after that, as long as things are continuing to progress in the right order. So that's kind of my thought process. And I do want to talk about thyroid hormone too. That was another change that we made. So she basically has been on a replacement dosage of thyroid this whole prep, which has been 25 micrograms. So within that, we looked at where her levels were at with her blood work, her TSH, her free levels of T4, free levels of T3, and everything was kind of like, I would say, on the higher end of the optimal range. But also, with that being said, her last blood work was in June.
Yeah.
So she's been dieting now another July, August, now September, we're into October. And you're going to have some natural downregulation of thyroid markers during your prep when you're not constantly overfeeding. So with that being said, we added in another 12.5, which basically, if you're not on any thyroid at all, 12.5 is going to just start to stimulate you just above natural threshold, which in some cases is important to not allow that regression or that down regulation of thyroid during a prep. So we basically just brought her up just slightly. I don't plan on going any higher than this. And then that was the other change that we made. So those are the 3 biggest variables that we changed. We pulled the refeed down from 1 day to 2. We increased cardio just in terms of output post-workout. And then also, like I said, the thyroid as well.
Yep. And then even though we only fed 1 day on Friday, I checked in with you, just my weight in the morning on Saturday, and then I checked in with you on Sunday morning. And on Sunday morning, because of my weight being significantly lower, you had told me to proceed with another high day. I was just going through my messages and refreshed my
Right.
brain.
Okay. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the second refeed day, but we still had those base days in between. And I clearly responded well from both of them. Like you said, I don't think that fat loss was stalled by any means, or prolonged. I think we were able to get right back to it, and my body just like ate it up, and I was able to perform really well. I slept great. I felt great in the gym. My training was awesome. Now I'm hungrier in those days typically. Usually my appetite is significantly more than what it is on a base day on my higher days, just because I think I have that stimulation of carbs being reintroduced, and not reintroduced because I still have them on my base days, but just having some more makes my hunger hormone a bit more aggressive. But
yeah, it's an insulin response too, which is normal.
Yeah, exactly. And we just have been proceeding with base days throughout this past week. Nothing out of the ordinary since Sunday, all base days, and then I'm just completing my cardio and my training as I usually would. And then another thing that happened this week that I guess we can get into just yesterday, actually, for us females especially, is earlier this month I thought I had skipped my cycle, whereas in the past few months it was consistent, it was regular, which was a rarity for me, being that it had been a long time, like probably over a year and a half since it was. And I got that back again yesterday. So it was like my body was trying to produce a cycle earlier last month in August, or beginning of September, I think it was. And then I finally made it happen now. My body finally made some things work now. So it's good to know that my body's still internally working as it should. And it makes me just it gives me a little bit of peace of mind that, you know, my body is still able to function, and we're still able to push like we are, and still able to hormonally be in the right spot. Now, as to why it was later than normal, I don't know, but I mean, I'm just glad it happens, because typically for me, in my case, I will lose it even in just the beginning stages of a contest prep. It's not something that sticks around for me. I have girlfriends who have it all the way up until their show, but that's never been me ever. So this is a first for me, and I'm almost excited to see how long I can be consistent for. And I can, like, going into the show, how consistent it will be and how long up until that it will still be there. And I can attribute its consistency, I think, just to regular supplementation, and then consistency among my variables, making sure my blood work is in check. I get my blood work done every few months, or at least the foot end of a contest prep before I start contest prep, just to make sure everything's in line. And if there's anything there that is a red flag or needs to be adjusted, we typically get on that. And luckily I have all the resources through Revive to help me do so, through Revive MD, through the supplements. And then just staying on top of everything, making sure that if I feel like I'm extra run down, if I feel like crap, I'm going to tell Matt. I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to make sure I communicate that. And typically, if you feel crappy on the outside, for me at least, I know that something inside isn't working right 100% of the time. Like, I had a contest prep a while ago. It was for my second show. Dieting hard, training hard, doing a lot of cardio, nothing was happening. And that was the start of my thyroid condition that I found out about. That was in 2018. So this thyroid prescription has been something I've been using since then. And then the whole hormonal side of it, that was always an issue for me. I have a long history with hormone health, but I think it's especially important to not let that fall on the back burner, and not just assume it's normal to lose your cycle as a female in contest prep, because there are ways to stay healthy and just be consistent among it all.
Yeah, so just from my perspective, I think for you girls, like, there's a struggle with your cycle, because I think it's kind of known for a lot of you that it doesn't happen. And then once it doesn't happen, it's almost like you don't want it to happen, because it kind of messes up your linear progression during a contest prep. But from my perspective, from a coach's perspective, I like celebrate these victories, and I try to encourage, you know, like even Nadia this morning, like the first thing I told her is like, I'm really happy that you got your cycle, because to me, if we can be making fat loss happen, and performance markers are still where they need to be while the female body is responding as it should, that's the environment that you want to be in for as long as you can possibly be in during a contest prep. So that's why I think it's very important that you girls talk about this, that you're aware of it, and you want to have a cycle, okay? Like the goal is to not slam your body into the ground, to not have a cycle. If you can be having fat loss occur and still have a cycle present, that is the ideal environment, because that's how your body was made, and ultimately that's the environment that your body's going to continue to respond positively in. And, you know, I talked last week or maybe 2 weeks ago about how fragile girls are, and the biggest issue that I see with females is not that they don't get into shape the first time, it's just that every time after that it's harder and harder for them. And then that's why you see these girls like rise to the top of the sport and then fall off, because their body's no longer responding the same way. But if you keep hormonal markers in place, and if you keep hormonal biofeedback in place, such as your cycle being consistent and present, your body's not going to have any reason to fight against you and no longer continue to respond. So for me, it's really, really important. And I would say like the biggest change for Nadia this prep is just keeping that overfeeding in while progress is happening. You know, if we weren't feeding her right now, I would say that there's no way that she'd be having her cycle. And I know that that's the biggest change from previous preps to now is the frequency, the amount of refeeds, you know, scheduled rest days, like all those types of things, because that's all very, very important. Also, rest is extremely important as a female. It's important for all physique competitors, but especially for you girls, again, when it goes to having your body be responsive long term. So, 1, be aware of these things. 2, definitely don't be discouraged if you have them happen. You want them to happen. And then 3, just be open with whoever you're working with about it, you know, because if we don't know, then, you know, because like just going through my head this morning, I saw Nadia's update. The first thing I saw was her weight, and I was like, dang, you know, like what's going on? But then I saw that, and I'm like, okay, this is great. Now, theoretically, I would have probably refed her again today because of where her rate of loss was up to this point. But when I'm navigating a girl during a cycle, I try to keep the variables consistent so that way we're not getting a false influx of weight from cycle weight due to increasing food. So I just kept the food stable. We'll let her cycle clear, and then we'll refeed her. So that might be tomorrow based off of where she's at. It might be Saturday, Sunday. I just want to, like, I think it's really important to not paint a cloudy picture during prep and to see what each individual variable is doing. So we'll let the cycle clear, let the water weight from the cycle clear, then we'll feed her up again, and then we'll have an exact response of what that food did versus putting it in a watery environment where water's present. Then you're adding carbohydrates on top of it to increase water and glycogen, and then you might not really know what's going on. So that's kind of my overall approach to how to handle girls during their cycle, and also encourage you girls that you do want to have your cycle. You don't want to put your body so far into a deficit where it stops months out of a contest.
Yeah, exactly. And then like this week, I noticed the weight fluctuations were a little weird to me, like you saw in my weigh-in throughout the week, because I'll include my other morning weights to you in my updates. They were not consistent very much. They were actually kind of going up, and I was like, okay, something's off here. Something is not normal. What's going on? And for someone who doesn't necessarily expect their cycle to come on, it's hard to read. So
Right.
having just solidified, it of course made me discouraged at first, but now that I know why that is, I can just kind of relax and let it pass and let my body do its thing, because like you said, it is something to celebrate, that I can still be in this position and be hormonally healthy for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. You just brought up another point, and then I just completely lost my train of thought.
I was talking about my weight throughout the week.
Oh yeah, this is what I want to. So, but pre-cycle, go back to we did our last video last Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
So what was your weight at between last Tuesday and then the low that you hit before your cycle came on?
My last Tuesday was, okay, let's see. Last week on Tuesday, I was 135.0.
Okay, right.
Sunday, I was 131.0.
Right. So, and we basically just enlisted those changes on Thursday. So from Thursday to Sunday, she's honestly, cycle excluded, she's had her best week of progress this week by far. Mm-hmm. And really, we just, in terms of variables, 12.5 mcgs of T3, We went to interval-based cardio. So really her cardio, she went from 20-minute steady state to, are you doing 20 minutes or 24 minutes of intervals?
20.
Okay, so we basically just added 10 minutes of hard cardio. The other cardio is staying the same. So basically, in terms of changes, we went one refeed, added 10 minutes of hard cardio, the other 10 minutes remained the same, and then we went from 2 high days to 1 high day initially off the bat. And again, this is all about, like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I have experience, and then I put kind of my experience into a new athlete, and then let the variables just see how they go from there. So, that's where we're at. I mean, again, she's making awesome progress. I think this has been her best week of fat loss thus far. And, we're going to continue at 7 weeks out just to continue to push. I want her, when I saw her last week, I felt like she had like 6 pounds to go. I think the goal weight in my head for her is around 126 this prep. And I think that she'll be right where she needs to be going into that final 2-week period at that point.
It's awesome to think about that and to think of how my training style has changed and how food and cardio has changed, and just to think like over the span of my competing history, how the first time I got on stage I was like 115 pounds, and then even just earlier this year I was like down to 122, 123 before Junior USA that was then rescheduled.
Right.
But to have made that progress just this year, I think is such a highlight and such a positive outcome of the crazy year that I've had, expecting to do these shows and then just keep, I've mentioned before, feeling like I've just been benched. But I think it all is going to happen in my time, in my favor, and I'm just doing what I can now to enjoy the whole process and make the most of it and not dwelling on what could have, should have, would have happened. Just enjoying every part of it and making the most out of what I have in front of me. And I don't think there's a spot I'd rather be in now. Had shows not been postponed or rescheduled and stuff, I'm really glad to be in this position.
Yeah, guys, I mean, there's a silver lining in anything. Those of you that were disappointed about not competing earlier in the year, hopefully you use the time to make progress in some form or fashion, because one of the things that I'm so adamant about is there's always variables that are within your control, and it's ultimately up what you do with them. So in this case, we actually had a conversation within our team, our coaching team, 2 nights ago, and I told Nadia, we were talking about like client retention and making sure that you make changes, within the first, because you really only have a short window to earn somebody's trust. And I talked about with Nadia, like if all I had with Nadia was our first 6 weeks working together, I probably wouldn't have retained her if she didn't believe in the long-term vision that we had. Because the first 6 weeks, she went from being in crazy shape to me basically overfeeding her, to me pulling back on variables, to me giving her food, and she just saw her condition just dwindle. But my long-term vision there was I have to get this girl being able to be responsive off of more food. That way when we diet down the next time, we have somewhere to pull from. Because she was ready for a show June, July. That show didn't happen, and then she wanted to do nationals, but how we navigated her from June, July to nationals needed to be very precise, or else her body wouldn't have continued to be responsive as it was. So, again, go ahead, say that again.
That's where staying ready, staying in show condition would have hurt someone.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, again, like I say this especially for you girls all the time. You cannot just constantly underfeed your metabolism and continue to expect it to perform over and over again. So credit to Nadia for staying mentally locked in, to giving me the opportunity to help transition her through this period, because now she's really benefiting from it. But it wouldn't have happened if we would have kept just driving her into the ground, or like trying to maintain 5 pounds away from stage weight, because we went from 122 to 139.
Yeah, I think I gained like almost a solid 15 pounds.
Yeah. And that's hard. I mean, that's hard for a girl that's like going into a show with the intention of winning, doing everything that she needed to be in condition, and then me just like being like, okay, let's just scrap all that. But it was for the long-term goal of continuing to have her body responsive. So like I said, I'm really, really happy. Do you have any other questions or anything you want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. We got into a lot of good stuff, I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited to let the rest of this week roll out and see, next Thursday where we are given the situation right now.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to be leaving to go back down to Florida on Saturday. So we'll do our next check-in in person. And then, yeah, we'll just continue to just provide you guys with as much as we can. Hopefully, again, I want you guys to use this to learn something from. So if there's questions that came to your mind during this episode, just ask them. Comment below. Ask them, whatever you have, whatever you want us to go into. Like today we talked about thyroid function. Like if you want to hear more about that or other markers or whatever you want to hear about, we want this to be available, a tool available to you guys to use. So just let us know how we can help. Hopefully also you're enjoying this and learning from it in terms of Nadia's variables and what we're doing with her response. And we'll be back next week.
Bye, guys.